Can I,
Go ahead.
did you skip the second question because you were a coward?
I did not. I skipped the second question because I scrolled down too far. So let's scroll back up to the second question, Tony, which is also from at VW Chad W. How much damage did Michigan's cheating scandal do to Ohio State? Do they have a lawsuit against Michigan for the loss of revenue because of it? I know they won the Natty, but it had to hurt the Buckeyes somehow. What was the true impact? Can it be quantified? So I think let's work sort of from the middle out. Do they have a lawsuit against Michigan for the loss of revenue? No, probably not, because that would be, what revenue did you lose? You kept your TV, you still got your TV revenue, you still got your ticket revenue. You're not, it's not like you get a big prize check for $10 million if you win the national championship or something like that. So you're looking at like, well, if you win the national championship, then you see this bump in merchandise licensing sales and that kind of stuff. Like, I think that's going to be hard to quantify. And it'd also be kind of hard to say, here is definitive proof like this, it's not, this is not like, I have, you were texting and you ran into the back of me at a red light. Like, these things are very easy to kind of go boom, boom, boom. This caused this and this caused that. This is a little more indirect. So, do they have a lawsuit? No. I think this is maybe the only case in college sports, Tony, where the attorneys are not about ready to jump in and file 17 lawsuits. As far as how much damage did it do to Ohio State, 2021, 2022, 2023 are the 3 years we're talking about here. And 2023 was a year where Stallions was out at that point, and the scheme was sort of known at that point. So, okay, you sort of set that one aside. 2021, maybe, I think that 2021 probably did some harm. And, if Ohio State wins that game, it's more kind of like big picture, indirect stuff. Like Ohio State wins that game, then is Jim Harbaugh kind of, has he accomplished his mission, and does he stick around for another year and all that kind of stuff? The one where you have the most direct case, I think, is 2022, where that was a very, very good Ohio State team. It was a team that had a Jim Knowles defense, and boy, Michigan just sort of had the right answers at all the times and made an Ohio State offense that looked extraordinary against everyone else they play, looked very, very ordinary. And then as soon as the Michigan defense didn't have the Connor Stallions bump because he hadn't been scouting TCU, boy, they looked real ordinary again against TCU. And then Ohio State just absolutely lit a Kirby Smart defense on fire in the Peach Bowl to the tune of 40-something points, and then lost Marvin Harrison and still finished with 42 points or whatever it was, 41 points. So, they've probably hit 50 if Marvin Harrison is healthy for that whole game. And then you look at the game in Columbus, and it's like, boy, that was, and the final score was a pretty big margin, but it was a pretty big margin as a result of two long runs at the end of a game that would not have been long runs if Ohio State hadn't been in desperation defense because they were slightly behind. And that's the one. And boy, if they win that game in 2022 and they win the Big Ten championship, then there's a pretty decent chance they're the number one seed. And, that they don't have to go play, they don't have to play Georgia in the first round, and they play, there's a decent chance you play TCU in the first round. And, I don't think beating TCU was as hard as Michigan made it look that year, because Georgia sure didn't make it look hard. So, in terms of the direct impact on Ohio State, I think the 2022 season and the fact that Ohio State didn't get a chance to play for the national championship that year, they made the playoff, but they didn't get a chance to be in the national championship game. They had that tough game against Georgia in the semifinals. If you're going to look at something and go, where was the impact? That would be where I would say the greatest impact was.
And others would say, well, you lost to Georgia anyway, so what's the point? Like, you would have had to have beaten them anyway, and you didn't. You were up 18 or whatever, and you still lost. So even if you beat Michigan that year and you win the Big Ten, you're still going to have to beat Georgia, and you didn't get it done. Maybe you had to play them somewhere else other than where they did. I also think in terms of how many national championships did this cost, like the first question, like that, is that the harm that we're talking about? Because I would say they probably saved money by not having to go fly everybody to Indianapolis. So maybe there's that aspect of it, but imagine taking this to court, and then you're like, well, okay, Your Honor, say Ohio State beats Michigan, they're still going to have to face the SEC in whatever championship game or playoffs. And Tom, as we know, we're talking hypotheticals here, and this is all the court can talk about. They're going to have to bring in some expert witnesses, and you got Michigan's lawyer like, Your Honor, I'd like to bring in an expert witness, Paul Feinbaum, to tell you how things would have gone if Ohio State had beaten Michigan. And of course, you would hear everybody saying they wouldn't have beaten the SEC anyway, so what does it matter?
Yeah, well, if you could avoid playing Georgia in Atlanta, that probably helps. Let's say that's worth, 2 points. Well, that would have made a pretty significant difference in that game. So, yeah, you can kind of look at look at a bunch of stuff, and it's all kind of hypothetical. But that's the year to me that I look at and go, if you're going to point to one thing, one year where, boy, it really doesn't feel like the correct team won the game, that's the one. I think 2021, you can say, well, they out-toughed them. In 2023, things were sort of, known enough that it came down to, 2023 was probably the worst of those three Ohio State teams in some ways. And they came within a offensive lineman stepping on Kyle McCord's foot in the final drive away from beating that Michigan team that went on to win the national championship in their own house. So, you're talking about very fine margins here. So if you have some, if something changes just a little bit in one of the previous years, that probably does swing some things. So there you go. But no, they are not going to, they are the only people in college sports that are not going to be suing someone